Hello, everybody. It's George from Ireland. So, welcome back to my channel. And today is Victory Day in former Soviet countries. So, Dzień Победы. Obviously, the Germans they signed their instrument of surrender towards midnight on the 8th of May. It was already the 9th of May, Moscow time. So, former Soviet countries used to celebrate on the 9th of May. Azerbaijan, it's a public holiday, but they don't actually hold a parade because their army day is towards the end of June, and they want to not distract from that by having Dien Победы compete with it. Anyway, I'm not sure when the Ukrainians do it. Do they do it the day before? Like Western Europe, it's a public holiday. Back to the issue. These used to be only on jubilee years in the Soviet Union, like 10th anniversary, 20th anniversary, blah blah blah. But then Putin brought back as an annual thing because he's trying to appeal to nostalgia for the Soviet Union, and he puts on a splendid show to give the devil his due. But there's some show horse units, not literally with horses, that train for that the year round. No wonder it looks good. And they would typically have 14,000 soldiers parading in it, hundreds of tanks, the fly past, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, to be hugely scaled back in coronavirus and even 2022, the first year of the war, because so much equipment had been deployed to Ukraine, a lot of it been destroyed and so on. And they had a solitary tank. That's it. One this time. And now they're not that short on tanks, but still, maybe they think it's maybe less embarrassing to have one than in like 10 really decrepit old models because they've had to repair things at warehouses from decades ago, not quite Second World War vintage, because so many destroyed in Ukraine. And they've ramped up production, but is having difficulty keeping pace with the rate at which they are being destroyed. And I remember years like 2005, loads of world leaders attended, and now Blair didn't go, and they were given official reason, and they weren't supposed to say this, but they blurted out in the Russian parliament because he penciled in the United Kingdom's general election for around that date, and unfortunately, Russia had to put up with John Prescott. I know, a calculated insult. But in that year, they had such delegations. They had so many world leaders, not quite George W. Bush, I don't think, but they had most of former Soviet republics sending troops. Israel, that the state of Israel didn't exist as such, all right, there were Jewish resistance fighters. India, China, many, many countries, the United Kingdom, France, the USA, they were invited to send troops, and they did. How different it is now. He had the heads of state of 6 former Soviet countries. Armenia snubbed them by not sending a high level delegation because they're deeply disaffected. They're so rancorously disillusioned with the Collective Security Treaty Organization, this military alliance of which Russia's the leader, and that Russia has failed to defend them, to do anything for them when Azerbaijan attacks Armenia proper, not just Nagorno-Karabakh, which is legally Azerbaijani. So it's a shadow of its former self. There were world leaders from Chad, Guinea-Bissau, and Laos. Now, not wanting to be chauvinistic, okay, these countries, they are not wealthy, they're not mighty. Okay, they should still be honored and so on, but it's not the company Putin would like to keep. He's certainly extraordinarily chauvinistic and outwardly contemulous towards what he would regard as puny nations. So then his oration, and of course it's completely predictable. I could have written the script myself hearing what he said before, and he said it many times. He just rammed home that lie that he's repeated incessantly, that this is the Second World War over again. Any Ukrainian who doesn't want to be oppressed is a Nazi. Any Ukrainian who opposes his genocide is a Nazi. Anybody who wants fair trials is a Nazi. Anybody who wants free speech is a Nazi. Anyone who wants free elections is a Nazi. Anybody who wants independent judiciary is a Nazi. Obviously, he didn't couch it in quite those terms. Um, but you get Western demagogues like this, like Blair or anybody else, and every conflict is the Second World War all over again, and the person is the next Hitler, and blah blah blah. It's a breach of Godwin's law, reductio ad Hitlerum. It's just so imbecilic. But unfortunately, there are plenty of idiots out there who'll fall for this rhetoric. And remember, there's 360-degree propaganda in Russia. They've been getting this for several years now. Every radio station, every TV channel, on the internet, billboards everywhere, school textbooks. So it's just relentless. It's just inescapable. This media environment. They're in that Putinite echo chamber. So yeah, there he posed, but the public aren't allowed anywhere near this, and they weren't again. But I'm surprised Ukrainians didn't try a drone strike, or were they worried about that there would be such retribution that they did? But it hadn't stopped even on this day, the day of supposedly Soviet Brotherhood attacks on Ukrainian civilians by the Russian military. But obviously, his war's not going very well. It's not going terribly at the moment. Now, Ukraine's got all this ammunition, but the Russians are just making incremental gains. They're just small bite and hold tactics. What is their game plan? Obviously, it's attritional warfare, but this is going to be made harder by the fact that now, Ukraine can last into 2025. I mean, there is that Ukrainian general said they're going to negotiate now from a relatively strong position. I don't see it myself, although in 2025 that may well happen. But because the USA has given so much, the Western countries in Europe are going to say, well, it's either worse, Earth continuing is not a forlorn hope. And just a decision by the European Union today that profits from frozen Russian assets are going to be used to buy arms for Ukraine. That's $3 billion dollars a year worth. I mean, not a huge amount, but the European Union could easily match this. And obviously, Ukraine's been let down. A lot more could be given. Okay, so the strategy is really just numbers, troops, feed them into the meat grinder, dupe them in places like India, saying that you'll be in construction work, and then force them into the military, recruit from former Soviet republics like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. Ironically, he needs these people more than ever as he's killing off his own youth. So dangle a Russian passport in front of them and then get them into it. If you really want to make it clear, just give it to the first day. You sign the military contract. Here's your passport. That's it. There could be rescission of citizenship, and they sometimes do it. So people who got killed for him, ideally not Russian, certainly not ethnically Russian, the indigenous ethnic minorities like the Buryat people from the Russian Far East are Chukchi, Chechen, Tatar. There's a bit of a headache for him in the North Caucasus. Is that Ramazan Kadyrov looks to be terminally ill? Needed two men to help him put his jacket on at the Victory Day parade. So dying of cancer looks like couldn't happen to a nicer bloke. There he is, age 46. But he's got several children by his few wives. Of course, a breach of Russian law. But who cares about a small matter about like law and equality for women? Because he's been running as a Shariat state for decades, and Putin was happy with that, with this Islamic extremism that Putin pretends to be against, so long as it keeps order in that very wild area. So Kadyrov says per capita, the Chechens have given more people than anyone else to go and get killed in Ukraine. But Kadyrov's son will take over, and Putin's hoping it'll be a smooth succession, just be plain sailing. But his son, he maybe not have the marbles that his father had. Does he have the mercilessness? I'm not sure. He's something of an unknown quantity. The other thing is hybrid warfare. And there was a fire in a warehouse in London, and some people have been arrested, charged with espionage on behalf of Russia. Shan't say any more. Sub judice. Is it true or not? I have no idea. It certainly wouldn't surprise me. And they're doing this in for years. Several years ago in Czechia, there was an explosion. A warehouse killed two Czech security guards, thought to be Russia behind it. And in most matters, you can't prove these things 100%. Highly likely, it was you storing weapons that were then shipped to Ukraine. Cui bono? Patently, it would be the Russian Federation, but it could have been somebody else by accident or design. But let's go with the most probable explanation. Other things is interfering with global positioning systems for civilian aircraft. I think it's just a time before one of these crashes, and that's 300 passengers dead, possibly. But why would they do that? What's the gain? Well, maybe just to show how threatening, how dangerous it can be. If this is what we're going to do, even when we're not at war with you, imagine what we do when we are at war with you. Cause economic problems is a downturn for the airlines, therefore the tourist sector as a whole. Maybe that it might be to do. They think this somehow prevents missiles coming in, but like NATO countries are not firing missiles at them, or is it to preempt what they think might be a sort of an undeclared war and sudden nuclear strike or something? Because it's a very provocative thing to do. But maybe the West will not riposte by interfering with their global positioning systems. There's only places near the borders of Russia, impacts Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, all on Russia's western border. So to carry on going like that and think Trump will come back, and obviously there's a considerable chance of that, either with or without a Republican Congress. If any of that happens, then there's a grave jeopardy about weapons for Ukraine. Notice when the Republicans in the House of Representatives, enough of them shifted to vote for this aid package, Trump did not criticize them. And it's thought that behind the scenes, Trump gave the green light to Mike Johnson, which doesn't guarantee he'd do so again if he was president. Remember, obviously, it's Congress has the power of the purse. But even failing that, even the Democrats, they may tire of this and not want to pick up the bill. It's already worked for him that governments have been ushered into office in European Union countries like in Slovakia. And the Netherlands, well, I guess Gent Wilders party, I don't think quite took off. It's Partij van de Vrijheid. wants to cut Ukraine off, was there somewhere else that's going to say less for Ukraine, and the Ukrainians will just succumb? Because the Ukrainians can never have parity in terms of numbers of troops. They can in terms of weapon systems, but they've just been very, very slow in coming in. The West isn't investing in its own security. Well, we have to keep these weapons for ourselves in case Russia gets through. Well, they're not going to get through so long as Ukraine is sufficiently well armed to raise the cost so high that Russia can't go on. And obviously, Putin's not quite as secure as he seems. I mean, not are there no mass protests. There are no protests at all at the moment. Leaders of the opposition either been murdered, they're in jail, they're in exile, and so the situation is quiescent, massively oppressive, um, just expanding the definition of treason, of dissent, and really not a peep of dissent allowed. So a surveillance state, but all this is very expensive. That could lead to hardship. We're told the Russian economy is growing, but that's partly because these international institutions have accepted at face value the Russian government's own reporting. Now, you'd have to be a complete idiot to believe any of that. Anyway, so many lies he's told. Yeah, Ukraine's got a Nazi regime, just like Russia wasn't going to invade Ukraine in 2022, just like there was no war. It was a special military operation. Oh, until suddenly it was a war, according to Putin's own press spokesman. Just like so the massive military buildup was no threat to anyone. Just like they were going to take Ukraine and in 2 days. It's over 800 days into the war. Lie after lie after lie after lie, unblushingly told. Just like Yevgeny Prigozhin never had any connection with Wagner until, oh, yes, he did. Just like Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine in 2014 until, oh, yes, they did. That when Russian-speaking men arrived from Russia in Russian army uniforms, carrying Russian army-issued weapons, no, they weren't Russian. That was the lie. It was that blatant, that shameless, that idiotic that they told that one. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon and donate on PayPal. George Callahan 79.com. Was it George Callahan 79 at gmail.com? Toodaloo.